Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi friends, I am so excited to be bringing you another video, and today we are doing one of my favorite videos to make. I say that all the time, but it's true. We are going to be going through the last few, and by few I mean 25 new releases that I read. If you saw my monthly wrap up for March, you'll know that I read a lot of new releases, but I actually haven't made this video since like mid-February, so we have some February and March reads to talk about. The way that I kind of do this format is I go through and I'm going to rank them basically from my least favorite new release all the way up to my top ones. And I just enjoy doing this. It lets me kind of gush a little bit more about ones that I really liked. I'll have links to all these down below, so if you love any of the ones I'm talking about or you want to give them a go, you can go ahead and click on it down below. It does help out the channel if you use those links, which is awesome. And then yeah, we'll just dive in because this video usually ends up being pretty long because I end up gushing more than I even mean to. So again, some of these are ones that I read arcs for, and some of them they're just new releases that I had to get my hands on right away. And yeah, they were a good time. So let us start with a couple that were my least favorite, and we'll go on up to the besties. It'll be great. So one of my least favorite ones was actually At First Spite by Olivia Dade. So sadly, I just did not vibe with this book. It had some promising parts to it. I really loved the hero. He was such a pining hero. He was so sweet. Even though he came off as a bit of a jackhole, because our heroine had overheard him say some disparaging things about her to his brother, because this book actually starts with her being engaged to his brother. And then we skip ahead some time and she has just broken up with her fiance and she's just feeling really lost. She'd made a lot of sacrifices and a lot of choices for her fiance to make his life easier, and now all of those things are just gone. And so she ends up still moving to the small town that her and her would-be new husband were going to live at. And it turns out that this house, which she it was kind of her wedding gift to her new husband, that she helped get this house for him that he wanted so badly. Well, part of the reason he wanted this house so badly is right next to his brother. So she now owns a house next to the man who she partially blames for her marriage not happening. So it's a very interesting setup. And then she's just trying to get her life back on track. I appreciated that, she's someone in her, I think she's in her mid to late 30s. And he, I think, is in his late 30s or early 40s. I can't remember exactly where their ages were, but I know she was older than her ex-fiance and she's younger than the brother. And she's just trying to get her life back together. So this book ended up being very much a women's fiction, okay? And I actually have a couple books in this that they were sold as romance and they're more women's fiction. And wouldn't you know it, they're both in the trad pup world, because trad pups still can't get their shit together about what they call romance and what they call women's fiction. But this was a lot about the mental health of our heroine. And while I'm not saying that journey wasn't powerful to see, it was a very depressing story for a good amount of the book. And again, it's not that romances can't be heavy. It's not that they can't have that. It's that that's not the bill of goods that I was sold with the book or what I was looking for. And, I like that this was very body positive. This is a plus size heroine and her weight really isn't talked about at all. And that's a much better change compared to some of Olivia Dade's previous works where it just felt that weight was cared about too much, which can be uncomfortable. I thought it was done really well in that aspect. But this one ended up being a 3.5 because it was an arc, that happens. I rounded it up to a 4, but for me it was a 3. I just didn't like how that was. And then for the HEA was there too quickly, and so for how much angst and pain I went through, I didn't get the payoff that I wanted to get, and that happens a lot. Another 3.5 that I had was To Bleed a Kingdom by Ella Dawes. This one just came out more recently. This was a debut book. This is a fantasy romance. It had a cliffhanger. There'll be more in this series. And this one has some bad ratings, okay? And I wish that I hadn't seen what the ratings were before I started it. However, I quickly discovered why people were struggling with it. It had a very powerful beginning. You know, as I said this in my review of this, it had a very powerful beginning with the mother of the hero is a queen. Her husband gets killed. She gets raped. And our hero is the product of that rape. So she survives and does get away from her assaulter, but 34 years later, like, our hero is the captain of the guard. He's the bastard son of the enemy, and his siblings love him, but his mother kind of despises him for being the product of this assault that happened to her, which, you know, in an aspect you can probably relate. She does try to get rid of this pregnancy. We don't have to see that, but because of like the magic involved, she isn't able to abort this child, and so she's forced to have this baby, and now she hates him. And then our heroine in this there's a lot of mystery around her and who she is. But this magical world, I feel like, was not fleshed out very well. It was very confusing. The best part of it was the last like 50 pages. It's clear these two are fated mates. It's unclear why that's important in this world or what it means. There are creatures that are almost like zombies that are taking over the kingdom. How do we defeat them? Like, there's just so many balls being juggled. And then it also was like these two were so horny for each other. I said this before. They were constantly thinking about banging the other one, but yet there was only like one sex scene in the whole book, which again, I talk about this way more when I wrap. It's not a problem for me that there was only one sex scene, but what was a problem is that they were constantly thinking about sex. So it's just like they're constantly, you know, and was that supposed to be the mating bond, why they're so sexually attracted to the person? But that is all we thought about, was getting it in, and yet it was like exhausting because every time they saw each other, it was like, oh, I can see the outline of his dick and I just want it. And him being like, oh, her breasts are so beautiful, I want to suck on them. And like, we have other story to get to, and that's all we were thinking about. But again, there was only like one intimate scene, so it just felt like they were constantly sex obsessed, but nothing was happening. And then, like I said, the last 50 pages, there was some reveals that were like really cool. You know, it's one of those, but it's like, but you didn't hold it up to that. So I don't know if I'll continue the series. I'm tempted because of where it ended, and also because this was a debut fantasy. So it's like, do I want to give them another chance? I might. I don't know. But it was a 3.5, more like a 3. And yeah. Okay, let's go up to some 4-star reads. Because I've said this, like, I generally give arcs 4 stars or higher. It's very difficult for me to go below. That's why, like, when I do these, all my new releases wrap-ups, you'll see that usually the worst I give one is 3.5, but I still round it up to a 4 for a review, because I'm just a big softie, okay? I don't like to start things out bad for an author, okay? I can't help it, okay? I can't help it. But let's go through the 4-star ones. So there was Tempting Promises by Corinne Michaels. So I really enjoyed this one. This one was 4 stars. And when I did my review of this, mostly the reason this was 4 stars was a personal reason, and it had to do with the farming content. I know I laugh so much. It had to do with the farming content because it was not done well. Both the hero and the heroine in this are supposed to be dairy farmers, and they are the laziest dairy farmers I've ever read. Their cows will all have mastitis. They are not being treated well. They are probably sick, and I would not be having the milk that came from them the way that they, at least the heroine neglects her herd all the time. She goes away, and there's only one helper on the farm. And anyway, I go into a whole thing about this. I grew up next to a dairy farm. My best friend's father owned one. My own father worked at said dairy farm for many years. So it just threw me out of the story. And there's just something that, like, I could not get that out of my head, because every time she would, like, be sleeping in, and, like, every time they would go away and do something or stay out late drinking, I'm like, bitch, you gotta get up at 5 a.m. and milk those cows, and you not. Like, it ruined it. Also, this was one where, like, they have a lot of animosity, mostly because they're in the same business, but also he fucked her sister many years ago, like literally like 5-6 years ago, and the sister saw them as being an item, and to him it was just a woman that he fucked. And when he like broke that off, she lied to the town and said that he cheated on her and that she caught him cheating. And so our heroine has always believed that about him, and he likes her, but she will always only see him as the person who like cheated on her sister. So it just was kind of a like, her sister's also a shitty human. She causes so much drama. And I didn't love that that was the thing keeping them apart so much, because honestly, her sister, you know, hating him kept them apart more than the fact that they were rival businesses. And I was just like, whatever. But I love this series. I can't wait for the next one. And I think too, I was just so disappointed because when I found out he was a dairy farmer, I was so excited. I just was like, Corinne, you should have done more research. I'm sorry, but you should have done more research, because I know I'm not the only person, because when I reviewed that book, a lot of people chimed in about, you know, what farming life is like, because you know what it was like. Okay, the next 4-star I had was Devious Vow by Jagger Cole. I won't go into this one much. This was the one that I stopped asking for the arcs of his. So he does have a newer one that just came out, and I did grab it. I haven't read it yet, but this one just, I needed to stop asking for arcs because his books were starting to frustrate me. They all felt the same. His are always enemies to lovers, and they're always over a misunderstanding, and they're always just so, the heroes are so mean for the misunderstanding. And you know, it didn't feel that way to me when I read the Darkest Heart series. Like, the first, like, 4 in that series, even the ones that were enemies to lovers, I thought there was, like, a better reason for the enemies in those ones, because it's, like, mafia families and stuff. But in Devious Vow, it was a hot mess for me, and I really didn't enjoy it. The hero was so, like, cruel, and the heroine was also married, but she was, like, it was a forced marriage, and her husband was just disgusting, and there's just too much like ick in that one for me, and I was like, not into it. However, some of my friends who read the arc of the newest one, Vicious Kiss or something, I don't even know, they said it's one of their favorites of his, so I'm like, damn it. But I didn't pick an arc for it. I was just like, I'm just gonna read it when it comes out, and we'll see if I still like it, and we'll see. So there was a cool announcement from him, though, that most of his books are finally, he signed an audio deal. I've wanted his books to be an audio, like, since I first read them. And so he finally signed a deal to have them all done in audio. So we are here for it. I'm very happy for that they'll be in audio. Okay, there was Dark Delights by Mila Kane. This is the second book in her hockey series. I can't remember the name of this series. Books. This one is, she is the daughter of the housekeeper for his family. And he has actually been abused by his stepmother. And the stepmother has so manipulated the dad that he blames the son. Not for the, he doesn't know about the molesting part, but he's made him look like a bad guy. And the heroine, she will help her mom clean the house sometimes. They went to the same schools. He's also friends with her brother. I believe they're twins. And so he's hated her, but he's like stayed away because she's seen him in some of his most vulnerable places because she's cleaned at the house and she's seen him in these situations, and he very much like blames her for seeing his weakness, you know, like that type of stuff. And then one day she finds his drug stash and she ends up giving it to her mom, and then her mom tells the dad and he gets in big trouble for it. So he blames her because he figures it out that it's her who did this. So now he's just going to punish her. But when she goes to college, they're going to the same school. Her brother ended up going to like a different school, and the school canceled her dorm contract, not his. And so the only place she has to stay is in her brother's room, which of course is shared room with the hero. So she is sleeping in a bed right next to her enemy. So there we go. That's what Dark Delights was. This one was okay. There was a lot of mind games that they play. Again, this hero was very mean to her. But in this case, I kind of understood why, you know, also based on the assault that he's lived through, his mental state, also him having to, like, he has had to get off of like drugs and everything. So there's a lot with this guy, and I forgive him a little bit for some of it, but I gave that one 4 stars. There was Moonlit Thorns by P. Rain. This is the first book in like a fairy tale retelling dark romance about like Thorn Manor or something, I think it's called. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I listened to the audiobook of it, and I liked this one a good amount. There's a sex club involved. There's a debt owed by the family, and so she goes to live there and has to become a servant, and then he ends up wanting to fuck her, so she becomes his mistress, and it's a whole thing. There was Jumping the Shark by Ash Raven. This was a really sweet alien/monster romance. We have a double-dicked shark alien who comes to Earth to go on a date, and he meets his mate, and then he steals her away to his home planet where he reveals himself, and she's like, you know what, I didn't have anything I was missing out on Earth. I would love to be your fated mate and get some shark dick from you. Okay, look at this cover. It is gorgeous. This was a fun book. It's a lot ridiculous. I wouldn't say a little, it's a lot ridiculous. But if you're looking for some escapism with some sexy, there's a little bit of daddy dom shark and some bit of little girl, just a little bit. It didn't get too icky. I mean, if you're okay with the sharkness, you're okay with some of the other stuff, you know? So 4 stars for there. Then there was This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. This is the second one that I said was more women's fiction. I know I'm not the only one who felt this way. Many of us who are obsessed with Kennedy Ryan, who love her stories, felt that this was more women's fiction than anything else. This is about Soledad, who in the beginning, she is married. She has 3 daughters with her husband. And we discover early on that he has been not only cheating on her, but embezzling from his company. And our hero, whose name is Judah, is the forensic accountant who has discovered all these issues and is the reason why her husband goes to jail. Well, correction, her husband's the reason her husband goes to jail, but he's the one who initiates him getting in trouble and ending up going to prison. And now we skip ahead, and Soledad, you know, she could lose everything. And she has had to kind of now pick herself up by her bootstraps and keep her and her kids going. She's a very powerful, strong woman, and she has her community around her, and it's just all rah, rah. It's good. And then we have Judah, who's also a single dad. He has twin boys. He is co-parenting very well with his ex-wife and the ex-wife's husband. They all still get along very well. And he wants Soledad so bad, but he knows that she's not quite ready to trust a man again, might never want to get married again, all of this. And so he basically just waits around until she's ready for him. There is no character growth for Judah. He comes on the page already fully formed and wonderful, and again, there's nothing wrong with him, but any other book by Kennedy Ryan that you will read has a beautiful story arc for both characters. And the fact that the real only arc of like Soledad coming into her own and trusting herself and rah rah, all that stuff, she's the only one who goes on that journey. And to me, that's what a women's fiction is it's about the woman's development and her journey. And again, doesn't make this a bad story. It is still powerful. It is still beautiful, but it was not a romance. And therefore, I don't even usually rate books that aren't a romance. And it's Kennedy Ryan, so it's still beautiful. But again, it was just Soledad. It was a Soledad show all the way through. Still very beautiful, still worth a read, but just go in with the expectation that this is a women's fiction with some sweet, swoony romance tacked into it. But I would say that it is a romantic fiction, women's fiction. So I gave this one 4 stars because you know, it also didn't make me ache the way the last 4 or 5 books I've read by Kennedy Ryan does, you know? And it's just, I know the power that she has and what she can do. And so this just fell a little flat for me, but that's just me. Y'all know I'm a Kennedy stan, so this isn't, I'm not giving up on her. I'm not done with none of those things. Absolutely. I cannot wait for the next book from her. But this just, I won't pretend I wasn't a little disappointed because I expect so much from her. I expect her to be able to do both. I expect her to be able to have those journeys for the characters and write a romance that knocks me off my socks. And we were missing some of that with this one. Then there was City of Darkness by Karina Halley. This was book 3 out of what will be, there'll be another one still coming in her like River of Shadows series. The only reason I got an arc of this one is that I didn't want to buy this book because I want to know how this series ends. But it has been years that this series has been going. So this one does start out really fun because if you read the first 2, you know where Death and Hannah are at the beginning of this. And they can finally fuck now. They haven't been able to touch each other this whole time. And so at the beginning of this, they're getting to make up for lost time. But there's also some shady stuff that's happening in the underworld and some people conspiring against them. And so a lot of this book is them having to fight back against that and work together. So it was good. Again, I rounded up to 4 stars, but I just really want this series to be done. Like, I am in it. I'm going to make it to the end, but I also am exhausted with it. And this is a series too that like part of it is like the author has to be inspired to finish it. And in between this book and the last one, she wrote like 4 other books because she kept getting distracted by other stuff. And it gets tiring, y'all. Even though I am a patient woman and I understand the nuances of authors, like I still wanted it to like go faster. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Yeah, I wanted that. All right, then there was Ruby Tears by Pepper Winters. This is the part of a new, like, it's a like spin-off series from the Tears of Tess series. This is the Mercer series or whatever. This one's about Henry, and he's going undercover into this like sex island to try to rescue human slaves that are sex slaves that are there. And to do so, he must kidnap a girl to give as an offering. This is called the Jewelry Box, this sex island. And to get in there and to try to let Q know where it is, he has to get there. He has to be able to turn on a GPS and be able to get him there. And so there's going to be 4 of these. And I don't know if I'm going to continue. Like, I was offered the arc of the second one, but this was very dark. I listened to the audiobook for this. It was in duet narration. It was very good, but it's very heavy. I knew it would be. But one of the things I've been trying to do is that I've gotten a lot like softer with the type of dark romance that I read lately. Like, I mean, you'll see this. Obviously, I'm still reading Pam Godwin, and those are heavy books. But I've gotten a lot softer with some of the stories that I read. And so going back into this world of Pepper Winters, which I had liked at one time, like it's hard what's happening in them. So this was very beautifully and powerfully written, but the fact that this is book 1 of 4, I don't think that I can handle 4 of these. So I probably won't continue this series, but I did try. So I gave it 4 stars. It was very powerful, like I said, but it was a lot. Another 4-star was Witch Queen of Halloween by Kresley Cole. I should have my physical book. It's not here yet. It's supposed to get delivered soon. But this one is the 18.5 in the Immortals After Dark. This was supposed to come out around Halloween, but Kresley, it took a little time to get out. So I understand if some people won't want to read this until the next Halloween. You know, we are supposed to get another Immortals After Dark this year. I hope that we do. But this one was just okay. I won't lie. I skimmed a lot of it because it does have a lot of nods to horror films. Like a big part of it is literally a nod to horror films, and I don't like those. I don't like those at all. So there literally are some direct correlations to some specific horror novels in this because Poppy and Rook, they get stuck in kind of this like haunted house on Halloween. And they are experiencing different creepy creatures and stuff that are from horror things. So I did a lot of skimming to this because I don't like those things and I didn't want to read it. But I read an arc of this and I kept it at 4 stars. The audiobook is available already, so I will reread this when it gets closer. I'll maybe reread it around Halloween or closer to when like the next book comes out. So yeah. Slay by Abby Glines. This was the first book I'd read by Abby Glines, and it is the first in a duet that is a part of this Southern Mafia series. So she does have another series, that Southern Mafia. This is a different branch off of that. And this one starts with this heroine who's in an abusive marriage, and she escapes from it when her husband gets attacked by some people he owes money to. What she doesn't know is the people he owes money to are the Southern Mafia. And so when these men show up and are beating the shit out of her husband, he gets shot. She runs. Instead of seeing if he's okay, instead of figuring out, she runs for it. She gets followed by one of these mafia men to just see what she's doing, where she's going. And they figure out that she is running because this guy abused her. And so the hero in this one, King, he ends up accidentally running into her at a truck stop and offering her a safe place to stay. And so he brings her to their home, and by like the matriarch of the family, she gets offered a place to stay until she feels better. Now, again, she doesn't know that this is the mafia or that it's the same mafia that attacked her husband, which she's not sad that her husband was attacked, right? Not at all. But they don't tell her where she is. And so she's very worried that the people who came after her husband will follow her to this place where these nice people live who are taking care of her and will try to hurt them. So they're trying to like convince her to stay and that she's safe without telling her that they're actually the ones that would be coming for her husband. So like, you're safe, right? And so this has a bit of a cliffhanger with her like finding that out by the end. And the second one, Slay King, comes out this month. And so I definitely will read it. I enjoyed this a good amount. It was 4 stars. And then the last 4-star one was Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. This was one I was very much looking forward to. Nevessa Allen is an author I've loved for many years, and I'm really glad she is finding such success with this type of book. As I've said, I really hope she still goes back to some of her other series she was writing. But this is a stalker romance. It's a masked man romance, and our heroine actually really likes masked men, and she's been following this one on TikTok. Well, it turns out this guy is actually her, like, they weren't really boyfriend and girlfriend, but like her ex-fling's like roommate. He's a tech guy, and he is obsessed with her, and so he's been making these thirst traps mostly for her, but a lot of people watch him, and he finally is ready to like make a move on her, and so he goes about doing that, and we'll see how that works for him, if it will work for him, you know, that's how it goes. But it was really hot. There's lots of kinks in this one, a full long list. There's blood play, knife play, there's bondage, there is blindfolding, there is inanimate objects being used as dildos. Like, there's just a whole thing. It was hot. It also has a tinge of humor to it. So it's not full on like Butcher and Blackbird humorous, but there's a lot of humor put into it. So even though it's lights out and it has all those dark things, there still is a little bit of a lightheartedness to it between these two anyway. You know, like, funny enough, like, our heroine is never super afraid, even when she doesn't know who this is. She's more like pissed off that someone is following her, and like it goes from there. So yeah, I had a good time with this one for sure. Okay, now I just have a couple 4.5-star reads. So there's Wild for You by Kristen Proby, which I've loved. I've talked about this one a ton at this point. I listened to the audio for this one. This isn't one that I read an arc for. I just really wanted it. I really wanted it. And it is a rancher, and it's a single dad, and it's a nanny romance, and it is connected with some other books by Kristen Proby, which I hadn't read. But our heroine, she is a daughter of like another series by this author, right? So her books all connect. And she ends up in Montana. She is just trying to get away from the city, trying to kind of live her life for herself because her family has a lot of money and they've always taken care of her, and she just wants to kind of be out on her own type of thing. And she ends up, through some things, becoming the nanny for this single dad rancher, and there is someone who's stalking her, so she ends up living at the house with them and then has a romance with the dad. So if you like single dads, if you like small town romance, you like country stuff, you will like this one. It was a really good one. Claim Me Forever. This is book 3 in the Time River series by A.L. Jackson. I am a influencer rep for her, so she kindly sends me the hardbacks of her books, which is just so sweet. Here's the pretty little character things. These are so beautiful. Like, oh my God. But this one is a single dad, and she jokes that single dad is her actual genre that she writes in, because she either writes single dad or single moms, always. Like, it's kind of a joke. It's funny. But this one is about our single dad who's a sheriff, and our heroine who is in town trying to discover what happened to her sister. So this is Savannah and Ezra, because her sister just disappeared and she doesn't know what happened to her. And she knows that the last place she was in Time River. So she's there. Meanwhile, our hero is very suspicious of her. She gets a job at the coffee shop where one of the friends works, or his sister owns it. And she ends up staying in his guest house when there's someone breaking into the motel she's staying at. And then she ends up kind of sort of being, I think she kind of becomes the nanny for his kids. Maybe she doesn't. No, this one she's not a nanny, but she lives next door, and so she ends up getting invited to meals with them. Where's one of the, I think I have one of the pictures of that one. That's cute. Where is it? There's a really cute picture if I can find it. Oh, there it is. Like, the kids invite her over for dinner. It's so cute. So they write her a little note that says, would you come to dinner? Check yes or no. So had a good time with this one. Sometimes the suspense parts in her books, because they are all romantic, like small town suspense, sometimes it gets a little bit much, but they're cute. They're cute. So what can you do? All right. Another 4.5 was Castles of Nevers a Nightmare by Lana Perchek. So this is a, like I said, it's kind of a spin-off series from the Fae Guardians, yet it's also taking place the same time as the Fae Guardians, because there's still 3 more Fae Guardians. There's the season of the Crow that's still supposed to come out, and this one is like taking place in between season of the Elf and season of the Crow. But we have Willow, who's the daughter of Clark and Thorn, I think it is, or Rush. Is it Rush? I can't remember now. From the first book in the series, and she has been living in the capital and learning how to protect herself, and then at the end of book 9, she is a part of the big battle that happens, and she loses her powers. And she blames the Slua, who she's been told she is their mate. There's the 6, the hive mind, the Slua. It's a lot. This is a confusing one to explain. And she has lost everything, and so she blames them. So her goal is she wants to kill them now. But see, they're her fated mate, and they didn't know that this was going to play out the way it was, and they want her. Now the thing is, they've been cursed, and all of them except for one has forgotten that she's their mate. So we're in a big mess, and I'm not going to go into more of it than that. You can watch my weekly wrap-up where I went into like a full-on thing about this, but I'm super intrigued. This is, I think, supposed to be like a trilogy about this. It's going to be obviously a why choose or reverse harem situation. And I'm actually into it because of how the Slua and their hive mind works. It makes sense that they would all kind of need to love the same woman because they share their head. So it makes sense that they would all love the same woman who's their fated queen, basically. So it worked for me. It worked for me. All right, then there is Heartbreak Handoff by Lex Martin. This one was this author was like new to me in the month I read it, but I did read the book before this one. But this whole series is about like surprise babies basically and single parents. I think that's all single dads, and they're like in college and they're football players and everything. And Heartbreak Handoff this one is a girl that she's a cheerleader. She gets pregnant by one of the football players, but when she goes to tell him that she got pregnant, she finds out that he has had a fiance this whole time that she didn't know about, and this fiance is actually a really sweet girl, but he had been like keeping up appearances that he was still with this girl from his hometown, and now she's actually going to be coming to the college that he's going to, and so our heroine is just left like screwed. And so her friend, one of the other football players, he decides to step up and help, and he kind of like insinuates himself into her life and is like, I want to be with you, I want to help. And she's like, you're taking on too much responsibility. But they end up fake dating, and he pretends to be the baby daddy. And so he takes a bunch of shit from like her dad and from other people, even though like they literally haven't had sex yet. He's pretending to be the baby daddy, and it's a whole thing. It was adorable. It was adorable, okay? He was a really sweet guy. Then there was If You Give a Single Dad a Nanny. Can you tell the theme of books I really like? Can you tell that I really like single dads and single moms and everything? This was one I had been really looking forward to. This is by Ann Einerson. She was kind enough to send me a copy of this along with some pretty swag. Like, let's see if you see this. Show it. This is the little family. So this is Dylan. He is the single dad, and his little girl, her name is it Lucy? Now I forgot her name. I think it's Lucy is the little girl. And then there is the next door neighbor, Marlo, who is an artist, and she lives next door. She's 10 years younger than him, and she has a dog named Waffles, who is the little puppy in there. And the little girl falls in love with Waffles, but Dylan has kind of a bad perspective of her. He judges her a bit too quickly, sees her as flighty, sees her as messy, and his life is very ordered, very in line. Now, he's a wonderful dad, okay? This man, like, he does all the cooking, gets our food ready every day. He's doing all of these things, as well as he's a billionaire. His family is very wealthy, and he, you know, works in the family business, but he cares so much. When his current nanny, she has to move away, he is like left in the lurch. He doesn't know what to do. And his family actually encourages him to ask Marlo, because they really like her, and she would be a really good, she'd be a really good person to be a nanny. She lives right next door. She loves your kid, but he's very worried that she wouldn't like be good at it because of her personality. And again, he's judged her very harshly. Like, he comes off as a bit of a dick in the beginning, okay? He really does. But what I love about him is he very quickly realizes that, yes, he did judge her too quickly. Yes, he, you know, just made rash judgments. And the more and more he sees her with his daughter, the more and more he gets to know her, he realizes how wrong he was. And not only that, he starts to fall for her. So this was very beautiful. It also gets very spicy. It's very fun. Here's a piece of artwork that she did. That's so cute. And I just really like that. I like a hero who can admit that he's wrong and that he can fall for her eventually. And I just love that. I love it so much, seeing where it goes and everything. So highly recommend that you give this one a go. There is a like prequel novella to the story that was a Christmassy one, and that one is called If You Give a Grump a Holiday Wish List, and that was the first one in this, but it was so cute, guys. I really liked that one. All right, let's see. I think that was the last 4.5 star. Okay, now let's go into our 5-star reads. So I will put these two together because you can actually get a bind up of these. I think, well, maybe I'm getting a bind up because there's a special edition that's going to be at a book signing I'm going to. But there's The Men of the Falls by Melanie Moreland. So this is Aldo and Roman, and this is kind of a mafia adjacent series. Like, they're not straight up in organized crime, but they do own a casino in Canada, and they deal with some of the what's it called? They deal with some of the organized crime. So we see that happen. The first one, Aldo, is about the I think he's like the money man at the place, kind of. And then our heroine ends up having, like, her partner left her and he stole a bunch of her stuff. And so she moves to this new town and she needs a job. So she gets a job at the casino working at one of the restaurants. And Aldo is the one who had, like, hired her to work there. And they just have this instant chemistry. And he's like, she works here. I can't have anything with her. That's against policy. It would be bad. But he's just, so his protestations only last for so long. And then they end up moving things along. Then there's Roman, who is the owner and the head of this. And he ends up, at the beginning, there's this woman who owes him money. And he is demanding the money from her, and she's like, I can't have it. I'll give you my sister in exchange for my debt. And he's like, excuse me? I don't traffic in human flesh, so take that garbage somewhere else. You owe me this much money, or you're going to pay for it in a different way. So instead of trading her sister with him for the money, she sells her, is basically what happens. Now, when this woman shows up with the money that she owes Roman, he gets a bad feeling about it, because he's like, she didn't have this money 2 days ago. Where did it come from? And so his conscience, he would never admit it, but his conscience is kind of pricking at him. And so sure enough, he looks into this sister, and she's disappeared. And so he's like, fuck, she sold her sister to somebody. I gave her this idea. That's what he's feeling. He's like, I gave her this idea, and now this woman has been sold. Like, what the fuck? So he takes it upon himself to rescue her. And once he's rescued her, he now needs to protect her, because the people that he saved her from are now going to be pissed that they're out the money they paid for her, and he's taken her away. So then it becomes kind of a captor-captive, because she's like, why am I staying here? And he's like, you don't get it. The people that stole you, they will try to take you back because they feel like they owe you. So we have to deal with that. And he's like, you know what the best way to keep you safe is? I'm going to marry you. And that's what he decides is the best way to handle that. So highly recommend. I really loved this duet. Then there was Small Town Swoon by Melanie Harlow. This was book 4 in her Cherry Tree Harbor series. And this one is about an actor, which is Dash Buckley, and the heroine, who I just forgot her name. It just went out of my head. But she runs a small town diner with her family, and he is back in town to visit. His brother's going to be getting married, and he also is like trying to break into the film industry. And so he's just really trying to work on becoming a, like higher class type of leading man than he was before, basically. Anyway. So she always has had kind of like bad feelings towards him, because when she was a teenager, she made a move on him. Granted, when she was 16 and he, I think, was like 19 or something, she made a move on him, and he's like, whoa, 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 we can't have anything going on. So that got a little bit awkward. And so she's always felt very embarrassed about that and kind of held it against him. And he's like, well, what would you have had me do? Like, you were a child. I couldn't do anything. And she's like, doesn't want to admit it, because again, she's butthurt about it. You know how it is. So anyway, but it very quickly becomes a friends situation. Like, she gets over it. She isn't really pissed at him. And he's actually helping her out with the restaurant while he's home. He's just like throwing himself into it. And she agrees to like help him get in touch with his romantic side by showing him some of her favorite romantic movies. So this was cute. I didn't have a single problem with this. I love how this one played out. And Melanie Harlow just has my heart forever. I love it so much. Okay. Then we, of course, have Hills of Shivers and Shadows by Pam Godwin. This is the one that I'll keep bringing this up, that I currently have this at a 5-star, but there are 2 more books in this trilogy to come, and depending on how the trilogy as a whole goes about, this will probably be a 6-star read. This series might be like my favorite series I read this year. I said earlier in this video, I haven't been reading as many dark romances lately. Like, I still read Mafia. I still read some of those bully ones, but they're not quite at the like sex trafficking, kidnapping, like awful level of stuff I used to read. But Pam is the one that I will always make an exception for. And I just loved this, even though it was so heartbreaking and dark and heavy. It's also so powerful because Pam tells a powerful story. Like, there's no other way to say it. She does. So this one is about Frankie, and in the beginning she finds herself abducted and taken to a remote cabin in Alaska where there are 4 feral men who live there, a father and his 3 sons. And there is a harsh winter she needs to survive. She's trapped with them. There's mysteries and things to figure out about them, like why are they all there? Are they all there willingly? What the fuck is going on here? And you will get those answers in this book, and you will be disturbed by a lot of them. You'll be disturbed by a lot of them, and that's just how the cookie crumbles. The next one comes out in a couple weeks. I'm supposed to get the ARC next week, and I'm just like, oh, I can't stand it. I can't stand it, y'all. It's crazy. Okay, then there is Blitzed by Devney Perry. I've said this is my favorite Devney Perry I've read. This is a coach slash student athlete, though she isn't his student athlete. So she's a volleyball player, he's a football coach. They meet at a 4th of July party for the block, and she doesn't know he's a coach and he doesn't know she is a player. They have this amazing night, and then when school starts, they realize they're screwed. Because they're next door neighbors and they have this connection that is just absolutely forbidden, but they can't help themselves. And I loved this. This is a classic, delightful, spicy, forbidden age gap, and I thought it was played out to perfection. I was just clapping like crazy. I loved it. I loved it, loved it. It was wonderful. So good. And I just loved the tension. I loved the build between them. I loved their connection that they just couldn't, it was so hard to deny. And I loved how it was played. It was wonderful. It was so sexy without being like over the top. And I just love that. All right, then we have some more here. We have Homewrecker by Sarah Kate. This one is the second book in the Good Brothers series, and this one is about Caleb, who he's married to Briar, and they have a daughter. And then there is Dean, who is a sex worker, and he works at the club that Adam and Sage run from the first book. And when his home burns down and his dad goes into an assisted living place, he doesn't have a place to stay. And Briar and Caleb happen to have a garage apartment, and so he gets moved in, and then things happen and they end up doing some sexual healing together. And yeah, I loved this one so much. I loved watching Caleb, come into some feels that he had. I loved watching Dean kind of bring both the truth of what, like, Briar, her desire she's been hiding, as well as, like, Caleb be able to be honest about some things he's been feeling. And it was just sexy. It was beautiful. It was powerful. And it's, like, literally, like, Sarah Kate's, like, biggest book. And it was fantastic. Like, it was so hot. It was so hot. And I loved it. It was delicious. Ate it right up. Then there was The Wickedness of a Highlander by Elisa Braden. This one, I have this out of 5, but through some contemplation, it's probably more of a 4, 4.5, because there was some things that, it was very clear that the third act, that it was revisited a couple of times. I don't think Elisa Braden maybe had that perfectly planned out when she was working on this one, and I think it's obvious too by the fact the book was pushed back a couple of times. It was still really beautiful. This was one of the McPhersons, Alexander, and Sabella Lockhart, who she is the sister of a previous villain in the series, and so there's a lot of animosity against her, and she has come to Scotland to make good. The only McPherson around is Alexander, and through some interesting hijinks and one highway robbery, basically, she ends up as his servant to earn some money, and he decides to use this to torture her just a tiny bit for wrongs he thinks she's done him. Yeah, there's some interesting games played between the two of them, for sure. But you know what? I loved it anyway, because Elisa Braden tells a good story. All right, we're almost at the end here. The last one that's a 5-star I have to share is Darkest Sins. I won't go into this one too much. I just talked about this one in a wrap-up. This is book 9 in the Perfectly Imperfect series. This one is an age gap. This one is a kind of stalker / protector romance where we have Kai, who is an assassin. He lives in the darkness, and he gets injured one night, and we have Nira, who is leaving the veterinary clinic where she volunteers, and she sees a man in an alleyway who's been injured. He won't let her take him to the hospital, so she ends up taking him in, sewing up his stitches, and now she's caught his attention. And so for the time that follows, he keeps an eye on her, he rescues her when she needs it, and they slowly fall in love. And then there's some people conspiring against them that force them apart, and it leads to a reunion that was absolutely heartbreaking. So this is Neva's biggest books. Like, her books are getting bigger and bigger, but this is probably tied with my favorite of her books. I loved it so much. You can read this one as a standalone if you want. You can read this one as a standalone if you want, because Kai is only mentioned briefly in previous books, whereas like some of the books directly connect. This one doesn't connect as much. So you could start with this one. There is going to be one more in this series before she starts a new one. And you will need to read this one before you can read the next one, which is going to be a like step sibling romance, which will be great. Okay, and now we have the 2 6-star reads that I have read. I love these both so much, obviously. They're my only 6 stars so far. As I said, though, you know, the Pam Godwin might be a 6-star later on. We'll see. There was The Love Contract by Sophie Lark. I loved this so much, y'all. It made me so happy. This was a fake dating, kind of like high school frenemies to lovers or enemies to lovers. And we have our beautiful Theo, who has culinary dreams, but she's currently an assistant to a billionaire who's just not treating her quite right. And then we have Sully, who is he is trying to sell some real estate that he owns. He's also trying to look after his father, who is an alcoholic and has gotten out of prison not too long ago and is just having a rough go of it. He has a twin brother who is a actor who's really fun. We really like him. And yeah, it was a crazy story for these two. But anyway, they end up fake dating because he blackmails her just a little bit. But it very quickly goes from being a like enemies to like it becomes friends. It's like enemies to friends to lovers. Also, they're like roommates because her apartment is getting fumigated. And since they're fake dating, she moves in to stay with him. She starts getting to know him better. They went to high school together. That's how they'd like known each other. And she gets to know his dad, who just honestly needs someone to talk to. And I've said I had such a heart for the dad, who really reminded me of my own. I know that's a weird thing to say, but he really reminded me of my own a lot. And so I liked getting to see him. I think I found the picture. Here we go. This is supposed to be the dad. Love it. And he has a really kind of like tragic stuff that happened to their mother. We find out about like his love and like why the dad went to prison. Anyway, I was so into the dad. The dad is getting a story in this series. So the next one will be the twin brother, which will be the sweetheart deal. And then there's going to be what's the last one supposed to be called? The heartbreak something? The heartbreak something? I can't remember. Oh, the redemption clause. Yes. So it'll be the sweetheart deal is coming next. And then the, redemption clause, which will be the dad who will be a bodyguard eventually. So I just love this, and it was just such a different thing that from what Sophie's written. Like her banter that's there in a lot of her dark romances is here in this. This was much more like emotional yet still fun and sweet. It doesn't go into rom-com territory, which is what I thought it might do. Like it does have lighter hearted moments, but there's still some really emotional things that get brought through in this. Like there's a lot of things that both Theo and Sully connect on. Like they both lost their moms in tragic way, very different but very tragic ways. They have much more in common than they would have thought. And so that's why like it's enemies to fake dating to friends to like I love how this played out. So, you know, as I always say, I am a Sophie simp, so take this for what you will, but also I'm always honest about which of her books are my favorites, right? Like Grimstone, didn't care for so much. The Savage, didn't care for so much. But this book was absolutely a 6-star. Like it wasn't even a question. I loved it. It was wonderful. And then the piece de resistance, so the book that we'll end it off with, which I'm sure you guessed if you follow me at all, was Jump on 3 by J. Wolfe. This is the final book in her Savage Academy series, and she won't be writing the new adult ones anymore, what she said, at least, because they haven't done that well, which is so sad to me. But this one is about Ivan, who is kind of the son of some Russian businessmen, let's say, but he's going to Savage Academy while having to do side work for his dad. And then we have our heroine, Evelyn, who has autism. She's a twin. Her sister actually had a crush on Ivan before, but he wasn't interested in it. And so now Evelyn, which he likes Evelyn, they're both swimmers, and so there are lots of bus rides where they're together. But they're, you know, she very much is keeping her distance, and he's just there for her. He's so kind. He tries to understand her. He gives her so much attention. And even though she keeps like pushing him away, not only, you know, and not because she's different, but because, you know, she believes her sister loved him first, and so he's off limits. Even though her sister is already happily in another relationship, would not feel jealous at all. She just can't get like past that, you know? So it is tough to watch them struggle through that, but it's also really beautiful when Evelyn, you know, thinks it through and is like, well, why can't I be happy? Like, my sister's telling me to, like, why can't we make this work? So I loved it. I love Julia Wolf. I love her stories. I love what she writes for me. So she has the final book in the Harder They Fall series coming next month, and your girl is so excited. I love Julia Wolf's stories so much. So, wow, we still made this a whole hour, but we did cover, I believe, 27 books. So we got through a lot. Let me know which of these new releases you've read, which of them have I tempted you to read. Again, I'll have links to all of them down below. If you purchase through that link, it does help out the channel. If you'd also like to support my channel, I do have my Ko-Fi down below if you'd want to make a one-time donation. I also have my channel memberships and Patreon if you want to support long-term. Thank you so much for watching, friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye.